When a 17-year-old black girl stood up in court to defend her innocent father, the entire courtroom laughed. Even the judge mocked her. But when she opened her laptop and spoke just 10 words, the laughter stopped. And by the end of that day, she didn't just free her father, she brought down the most corrupt judge in the city. Stay till the end, because her courage will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that inspire. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension, whispers, and the creak of old wooden benches. At the defense table sat Marcus Carter, a construction worker with calloused hands and weary eyes, accused of a crime he didn't commit. Beside him sat his 17-year-old daughter, Amara, her fingers trembling as they brushed over a stack of legal notes she had written by hand. The bailiff's voice echoed, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Harrison." Every person in that courtroom stood, except for Amara's courage. The judge walked in, eyes cold, voice heavy with arrogance. "So," he said with a smirk, "you're the girl who thinks she can play lawyer today?" The gallery chuckled. Even the prosecutor grinned. But Amara didn't flinch. She stood, her small frame radiating a quiet fire. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, "because the real lawyer my father was given didn't care enough to defend him." The room went still. Judge Harrison leaned forward. "Careful, young lady. This is a courtroom, not a classroom. You'll find no sympathy for teenage theatrics here." Amara's voice was soft but unwavering. "I'm not asking for sympathy, Your Honor. I'm asking for truth." Her father looked at her, pride and fear battling in his eyes. Marcus had spent his life teaching her that integrity was a man's armor. He just never imagined his daughter would use that lesson to face a judge. The prosecutor, Mr. Walsh, rose from his chair. "Your Honor, this is absurd. The defendant's daughter has no legal training. This entire defense is a circus." The judge nodded slowly. "Perhaps it is. But if she wishes to embarrass herself, I'll allow it. Proceed, Miss Carter, and try not to waste this court's time." Amara took a deep breath, her voice steady. "Then let's not waste time, Your Honor, because I intend to prove that my father, the man sitting beside me, was framed by the very people who claim to seek justice." A low murmur spread through the gallery. Walsh smirked. "Big words for a little girl." Amara turned to him. "Truth doesn't need to be big, sir. It just needs to be heard." She began to speak, not like a lawyer, but like a daughter who refused to see her father destroyed by lies. She told the court how her father was accused of assaulting his supervisor, a man named Jake Morrison, after reporting unsafe working conditions. She described how Morrison had friends in powerful places, including Judge Harrison himself. The judge shifted uncomfortably. But when Amara revealed that her father's original lawyer had spent just 14 minutes reviewing the case before recommending a guilty plea, the courtroom gasped. "You see, Your Honor," she said softly, "some people do their jobs for money. Others do it for justice. I'm here for the second one." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Enough of your speeches. Do you have any real evidence, Miss Carter?" Amara looked down at her notes, then at her father's trembling hands. "Yes, Your Honor, and when I show it, this entire courtroom will see who the real criminal is," the judge chuckled. "We'll see about that. This court is adjourned for recess." As the gavel struck, Amara sat down beside her father. He whispered, "Baby girl, you don't have to do this." She smiled faintly. "Yes, I do, Dad, because when the system forgets justice, someone has to remind it what the truth looks like." That was the moment everything changed. The moment a 17-year-old girl decided to stand up against power, corruption, and fear. And though no one knew it yet, that same girl was about to turn a courtroom of doubters into believers. The courtroom lights flickered as people shuffled back to their seats. Recess was over, and Amara knew that the real battle was just beginning. Judge Harrison adjusted his robe, his smirk returning. "Well, Miss Carter," he said mockingly, "ready to play lawyer again? Or have you realized this isn't some high school debate?" Amara stood up slowly, her laptop in hand. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she said calmly, "truth doesn't need a degree. It just needs courage." A few people in the gallery murmured in agreement, quiet voices rising in a room that had once laughed at her. The prosecutor, Mr. Walsh, slammed his file on the table. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. I have video evidence showing Marcus Carter assaulting his supervisor. Case closed. He turned the monitor toward the courtroom and pressed play. On the screen, blurry security footage showed a man, same height, same jacket, shoving Jake Morrison outside the work site. The crowd gasped. Even Marcus dropped his head in disbelief. Amara's heart pounded. She looked at her father, the man who had never even raised his voice at home, now accused by something that looked almost real. But something about that video didn't sit right. She took a deep breath. Your Honor, she said, can I examine the footage? Judge Harrison rolled his eyes. Go ahead, but I doubt your teenage laptop will reveal anything my forensics expert missed. Amara plugged in her flash drive and loaded the footage on her screen. Her fingers trembled over the keyboard as she zoomed in, frame by frame. The room fell silent, and then she froze. There, in the corner of the video, was a timestamp, but the date was wrong. It showed the incident happening 2 days before her father was even on site. Your Honor, she said softly, this footage is edited. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. Order, explain yourself. Amara pointed to the screen. The timecode was altered. The metadata shows this file was modified last week, not months ago when the incident supposedly happened. Whoever presented this is trying to frame my father. The judge frowned. That's a serious accusation, young lady. It's not an accusation, she said. It's the truth. Mr. Walsh turned red. This is outrageous. She's tampering with evidence. Amara faced him squarely. No, sir. You already did. The crowd began whispering again. The bailiff stepped forward, unsure whether to silence them or let the tension rise. Amara clicked again, bringing up a second piece of evidence. A still image. In this frame, she said, you can see a car behind the fight, the same model, same plate, that belongs to Mr. Morrison himself. He wasn't attacked. He staged it, gasps filled the room. The judge's gavel hit the wood again, harder this time. Enough, he shouted. This court will not entertain conspiracy theories. Amara met his glare, tears forming in her eyes, not of fear but fury. Maybe you don't want to entertain them, Your Honor, because you already know they're true. The room froze. Even the bailiff's hand stopped midair. Watch your tone, the judge growled. But Amara didn't back down. No, sir. I think it's time we all start watching something else. The truth. She pulled a folder from her bag, filled with records she had found by spending nights in public archives. Inside were signed documents linking Judge Harrison and Jake Morrison in a private construction deal, the same project her father had reported for fraud. The courtroom went silent again. You could hear the sound of hearts pounding, the shift of power beginning to turn. Your Honor, she said slowly, her voice trembling with emotion, my father isn't the one who broke the law. He's the one who believed in it. But maybe that's his biggest mistake, believing in men who wear robes instead of truth. The judge's face turned pale. Bailiff, he ordered, remove this girl from the courtroom. But the bailiff hesitated. He had seen enough. He looked at Amara, then at the judge, and didn't move. And in that silent defiance, the truth had already begun to win. When the bailiff refused to move, the courtroom froze. A single act of silence that spoke louder than words. Judge Harrison's authority hung in the air like shattered glass. Officer, he barked again, remove this girl immediately. But the bailiff stood firm. Sir, he said carefully, I can't, not until I see the full evidence she's presenting. The crowd erupted, whispers turning into bold voices. She's right, someone shouted. Let her speak. Amara looked around, her chest rising with each breath. For the first time, the laughter that had mocked her was replaced by something new. Respect. That night, the story broke across social media. Clips from the courtroom leaked, Amara standing up to the judge, exposing corruption, defending her father with nothing but truth and courage. Within hours, Lawrence's justice for Marcus began trending. People from every corner of the city shared her words. She's just 17. She stood against a judge. She's the future we need. By morning, reporters surrounded the courthouse. Cameras flashed. Microphones reached toward her like lightning rods of curiosity. Amara, how did you uncover the evidence? Are you afraid the judge might retaliate? What do you plan to do next? She didn't crave fame. She just wanted fairness. So she said only this: "My father taught me to never bow to lies, no matter who tells them. I'm just keeping that promise." Inside his mansion, Judge Harrison watched the news coverage in silence. His wife tried to speak, but he raised a trembling hand. "They're turning on me," he muttered. "Over a child," he called Walsh, the prosecutor. "This has gone too far. End this." "I don't care how." Walsh hesitated. "Sir, if we push harder, the press might dig deeper. Maybe it's better to let the case—" "End it," the judge roared, "before she destroys everything we built." But what they didn't know was that Amara had already prepared her next move. Back at home, she sat by the window, her laptop open, her eyes tired but determined. Her father walked in quietly, carrying 2 mugs of cocoa, the kind he used to make when she couldn't sleep as a kid. "Baby girl," he said softly, "you've done more than enough. Let it go before they come after you." Amara looked at him with tears glistening in her eyes. "Dad, they already came after you." "I'm just finishing what they started," he smiled sadly. "You remind me of your mom. She never backed down either." Amara swallowed hard. "Then I hope she's watching." The next day, as the court reconvened, the atmosphere was different. The once arrogant whispers had turned into murmurs of anticipation. Reporters filled the back rows. Cameras rolled. Judge Harrison entered, his expression forced calm, but his eyes betrayed panic. "Miss Carter," he began stiffly, "this court will now continue your father's case, but I advise you to choose your words carefully." Amara nodded. "I always do, Your Honor." She placed a printed file on the desk. "These are financial statements showing that Jake Morrison, the so-called victim, transferred $20,000 into an offshore account linked to your name 2 weeks after my father's arrest." The judge's gavel hit hard. "Objection! Irrelevant and inadmissible." But before he could continue, the crowd gasped, because the courtroom doors had opened, and a group of reporters entered, live streaming the hearing. One of them shouted, "Judge Harrison, can you explain these allegations?" The judge's face turned white. Security tried to move them, but it was too late. The truth was public now. Amara looked straight at him. "You can silence me, Your Honor, but can you silence the truth?" Her words echoed through the chamber, and for the first time, the judge didn't answer. He just stared at her, as if realizing the power of one brave voice could tear down an empire built on lies. That was the day cracks began to form in the walls of power, and with each word Amara spoke, the truth poured through those cracks, unstoppable, undeniable, and pure. Amara's hands trembled slightly as she opened her laptop. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation, but she stood taller than ever. Every eye in the room, judge, jury, prosecutor, even her father, was fixed on her. For weeks she had prepared for this exact moment. Weeks of combing through documents, watching security footage, and tracking down witnesses who had been silenced. And now she had the proof. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice steady, carrying the weight of every injustice her father had suffered. "The prosecution has built a story on lies, fabricated evidence, and intimidation. But the truth doesn't need embellishment. The truth is here." She clicked her laptop, and a crystal-clear video appeared on the courtroom's giant screen. The footage showed her father calmly confronting a workplace incident while the supposed victim, Morrison, lunged aggressively first. Every shove, every flinch, every moment was captured. Amara narrated the video, pointing out how her father had acted only in self-defense. Prosecutor Walsh shot up. "Your Honor, this footage wasn't disclosed. It could be doctored." Amara didn't flinch. "Your Honor, the prosecution just presented evidence without warning, so I am simply following their own precedent." Her eyes scanned the courtroom. "And this video comes from the same security company Morrison Construction uses. They tried to erase it, but someone preserved it. Someone brave enough to speak the truth." The courtroom fell silent as Carlos Martinez, the security guard who had risked everything to save the footage, walked forward. His uniform was crisp, his eyes unwavering. "Mr. Martinez," Amara said, stepping beside him, "did you witness the incident?" "Yes," he said firmly. "Morrison attacked first. Marcus tried to protect the crew and de-escalate, but Morrison wouldn't stop. My family was threatened to stay silent. but I couldn't let that happen." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Judge Richardson's knuckles turned white around his gavel. The power he had wielded for years, control over witnesses, influence over contracts, manipulation of cases, was slipping through his fingers. Amara didn't pause. She opened a new folder revealing financial records, internal emails, and city contracts. "The corruption runs deeper than this case," she said. "Morrison Construction has been using bribes and threats to manipulate the system. Your family business, Judge Richardson, received millions in contracts from Morrison while sending whistleblowers to prison. My father is innocent. The real criminals are sitting right here in this courtroom." The courtroom erupted. Shouts, murmurs, reporters scrambling, jurors leaning forward. Judge Richardson slammed his gavel, but the damage was done. Public records, witness testimonies, and irrefutable video evidence were now laid bare. Amara took a deep breath. "Your Honor, I respectfully ask you to recuse yourself from this case. The evidence of conflicts of interest is overwhelming. Justice cannot be served here unless we act now." For the first time in decades, the courtroom was silent, not with fear, but with awe. The teenager who everyone had dismissed, laughed at, and underestimated had brought the truth to light. And in that silence, the balance of power began to shift. The courtroom held its breath as Judge Richardson stared at the evidence before him. Amara's words, the video, the testimony, the financial records, it was all undeniable. For the first time, he could not hide behind authority, intimidation, or fear. "This court acknowledges that there may be conflicts of interest," he finally whispered, his voice trembling. "I hereby recuse myself from this case." The gallery erupted in whispers and gasps. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment. Amara's mother buried her face in her hands, tears streaming down. Marcus, her father, blinked in disbelief, as if waking from a nightmare. The man who had spent weeks behind bars, crushed by a corrupt system, was finally free, but Amara wasn't finished. She turned to the jury. "This isn't just about my father. This is about every worker, every family, every innocent person who has suffered because of corruption, lies, and intimidation. The system can be broken, but it can also be fixed if we refuse to be silent." Judge Richardson sat frozen, his gavel slack in his hand, his decades of power crumbling. Prosecutor Walsh shuffled papers frantically, trying to salvage his case, but there was nothing left to save. Within hours, Judge Patricia Martinez, a jurist known for her integrity, was assigned to the case. She reviewed Amara's evidence meticulously in her chambers. When she returned to the courtroom, her presence commanded respect. After reviewing the evidence presented by the defense, she announced, her voice firm, "This court finds the prosecution's case fundamentally flawed. All charges against Marcus Williams are hereby dismissed." Amara's knees threatened to buckle. Marcus reached for her hand, his eyes filled with tears. "You did it, baby girl," he whispered, voice choked. "You saved me." But the courtroom's astonishment wasn't done. Judge Martinez continued, "The evidence of corruption, witness intimidation, and manipulation is being referred to the State Attorney General for immediate investigation. Judge Richardson, you are barred from hearing any cases pending this investigation." The gavel hit with finality, but it was not just the sound of law, it was the sound of justice restored. Amara's heart swelled as construction workers, families, and even strangers in the gallery approached to thank her. People who had once felt powerless now saw courage embodied in a 17-year-old girl who refused to back down. Carlos Martinez stepped forward, extending his hand. "Miss Williams," he said, voice trembling, "thank you for giving me the courage to tell the truth. My daughter will grow up in a world where standing up matters because of you." Amara smiled, understanding that this victory went far beyond freeing her father. She had exposed a system of corruption, given voice to the silenced, and inspired countless others to fight for justice. As they walked down the courthouse steps, the reporters clamored, but Amara spoke with clarity. "My father is innocent, and today justice was served. But this isn't just one case. It's a reminder. Don't ever stay silent when you witness injustice. Speak, fight, and act." Marcus wrapped his arm around his daughter's shoulders, pride shining in his eyes. The girl who had grown up reading law books in a small apartment had just changed lives and exposed corruption at the highest level. And as cameras flashed and applause filled the streets outside, Amara knew something powerful: knowledge, courage, and a refusal to accept injustice could move mountains, even in a world designed to crush the powerless. 6 months later, Amara Williams walked across the stage at her high school graduation. The applause was loud, but her mind wasn't on the ceremony. It was on the journey that had brought her here. Her cap held more than a tassel. Tucked inside was an acceptance letter to Harvard Law School, a full scholarship awarded for extraordinary courage in pursuit of justice. The Williams family apartment looked different now. Framed newspaper articles chronicling Amara's courtroom triumph adorned the walls. A photograph of her receiving the Young Advocate Award from the Cleveland Bar Association stood proudly beside letters from families whose loved ones had been freed. After Judge Richardson's corruption was exposed, Marcus had returned to construction, but not as a laborer. Now he was a safety supervisor with the authority to protect workers and enforce regulations. The crews who had once watched him arrested now looked to him as a leader, a guardian who could prevent the abuses they had feared. "What are you most proud of, Dad?" Amara asked as they packed boxes for her move to Cambridge. Marcus smiled, eyes shining. "Not that you saved me, but that you saved every worker who'll never face a rigged system because you had the courage to fight." Amara picked up the worn constitutional law book that had started it all. "You taught me knowledge is power," she said softly, "and courage is what turns knowledge into justice." Her actions had sparked a wave of change. 17 wrongful convictions were overturned. Judge Richardson was serving time for corruption, and Morrison Construction had been shut down. Its contracts redistributed to companies that actually followed safety regulations. But Amara's greatest victory wasn't in the courthouse. It was in the dozens of letters she received from young people inspired to stand up against injustice. At Harvard Law School orientation, Amara addressed 200 of the brightest legal minds in the country. But she knew something they didn't. The most powerful force in any courtroom wasn't prestige, connections, or expensive suits. It was a person willing to speak the truth even when the system tried to silence them. "What injustice will you refuse to accept?" she asked the audience. "What corruption will you expose? What family will you fight for?" Her words resonated far beyond the walls of Harvard. They reached anyone who had ever felt powerless, anyone who had been told to stay silent in the face of injustice. Amara had proven that even one voice, one determined, fearless voice, could bring down the most powerful people in a corrupt system. And as she looked out over the room, she remembered that day in the courtroom when laughter filled the air, when even the judge mocked her, and when she dared to speak 10 words that changed everything. She had not just saved her father, she had sparked hope, justice, and courage in countless others. Amara smiled at the camera during her final interview. They underestimated a black girl with law books and a righteous cause. What are they underestimating about you? The system tried to break my family. Instead, we broke the system. And this is only the beginning. If Amara's story inspired you, hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when they refuse to stay silent.